Hey everyone, Robert here, author of Expansion Mastery, the practical guide to living a fully engaged life. Are you ready to start living your life to the fullest? Are you ready and willing to transform yourself and your life from ordinary to extraordinary? Then welcome, my friends, to the Fully Engaged Life. Welcome back to the show, everyone, and welcome to the final episode in this 27-part series where I address every single one of my challenge practices from my book, Expansion Mastery, in order. The final challenge is Challenge 5 of the esoteric section of the being level, and this is stilling the mind. The idea of zero and no mind development. Now, some of you may not realize it until you see the bigger picture, so I'm going to explain something before we get started. If you paid close attention to the fourth challenge, the previous challenge in the section, that was kind of part one, which was about overcoming the ego. That was your first introduction to beginning practices to help overcome the ego. You could look at this as being the second part of that. In other words, these exercises are extensions on the first. You put all of them together, and now you have a very powerful practice. And you can see the anti-ego nature of this practice by being zero. When we return to a state of zero, that means that there is no sense of self. Everything is empty, it's free, which means there can be no ego. And the same thing with no mind, because the ego dwells within the mind. And when we go beyond the mind into a state of no mind, the ego cannot possibly exist there. So in this way, you'll be able to understand how to build upon the previous practices and realize how they offered you a solid foundation to go into these two versions, which will help you overcome the ego. Now, these things were in a bit of a succession, so each one is sequential in nature, adding upon the previous. And this is where we end. We are ending with this idea of becoming zero. We're ending with this idea of attaining no mind, to go beyond the mind into perfect and complete stillness, silence, and awakening. As I state in my book, this is one of the most commonly requested techniques. People like the idea of attaining no mind. People like the idea of overcoming their ego. That is until they actually start engaging it. The percentage rate of success with these type of practices is extremely small. Not because the practice is so difficult or complicated. It's fairly simple. Now, it isn't easy, but it's not complicated. It's just that most people are afraid once they get into this level of practice. And that's the only thing that holds them back. You're holding yourself back, essentially, right? This is what happens is people become afraid of losing their identity. They become afraid of attaining this level. They become afraid of leaving many of their bad habits and addictions and delusions behind, and so they shut this down partway in. This is why I explain that it is so necessary to have a warrior's spirit. You truly need a warrior spirit. You have to be courageous. You have to be strong when you go into these practices. They sound very nice, and people get used to the typical foofy, new agey approach to these things, which really is a waste and just serves to further bolster your delusions. Doesn't offer anything real or lasting whatsoever. But when we get into real authentic practices such as this challenge, well, then you're going to understand why I called these challenges, right? It'll become extremely evident. But that doesn't mean you can't succeed. And that doesn't mean it has to take you forever to succeed. It's different for every individual. You will have your own experience. My agenda here is to prepare you for this so you know a little bit of what to expect going in. Why? Because that adds to your ability to succeed, and that's my agenda, is your success. So let's begin with this idea of being zero. This is the being section, right? And we are human beings. So what we want to do is learn how to return to a state of being zero. And this is a concept that is contained within several traditional Japanese martial arts, as well as within various spiritual traditions. And here we want to look at a number of things. The first thing in attaining a sense of being zero is letting go of our identity and no longer clinging to the things that create our identity. We want to let go of any of these silly attachments that we've created in our mind. We let go of delusions, we let go of beliefs, and we let go of anything that we have created in our own head. We let go of the things that we have been conditioned to believe or to become, right? Society places many demands on people, and we let go of any of those external demands as well as our own internal demands. We let go of the identity. We're not attached to our name, a certain heritage, or anything else that we have worked up in our head that we are. So this is one of the first steps to becoming zero. Another step is to overcome the ego. When you overcome the ego, then there is no self. And this is what zero means. There's no sense of self. And in martial arts, this comes through, at least in the Japanese martial arts, as very typically seen in a STEMI technique. This is where, as a last-ditch effort, Hail Mary technique, I'm going to throw my body to the ground and try and throw the opponent to win this fight. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to throw your mind and body away. In other words, you have to be willing to die. So becoming zero also includes one's ability to no longer fear death. And that only happens when you overcome the ego. Once you start overcoming the ego, you fear death less and less until there is no more fear of that. And as we know, most fears, embarrassment, or anything like that, most fears can be traced back ultimately to human beings' innate fear of death. But that can be overcome. You can accept instead of resist such things. And again, I'm not speaking theoretically here. I've lived this. So there are certain practices that we have to undergo in order to reach this kind of level. And this doesn't mean that we no longer enjoy life, that we no longer, try to have a great life and wonderful experiences and things. This frees us of this innate fear that allows us to get out there and live fully engaged. You want to understand that it is the ego that holds us back from living a fully engaged life. Without that interference, we are unshackled. And we are capable of spreading our spiritual wings and soaring into the sky and living a fully engaged life. I paint that picture for you not as a way to sound foofy, but as a way to illustrate the sense of freedom that comes with the letting go of one's ego. Because we have to remember, the ego and the identity it has created is the false self. Okay? It is the false self. It is not the real us. It's not the real you. It's not the real me. It is the fabricated delusion of our own mind. And this leads us into no mind, because when we are in a state of no mind, we are in this state of zero. And this is an important thing to understand. A lot of people miss this connection. But we are actually in a state of zero when we go into no mind, because there is no sense of self whatsoever. We go beyond the mind. There's no thinking, there's no intention, there's no anything. There's simply a connection with our conscious awareness, our true voice, our higher consciousness. So when you are in no mind, you cannot experience fear, not even the fear of death. Why? Because those fears come from the ego, and the ego dwells in the mind. When we transcend the mind, we go beyond that realm, it can't exist. It simply doesn't exist. I'm starting to read in more and more spiritual literature about how the state of no mind is a myth and can't really be attained and is so difficult. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is a very real state of mind, and it has various layers or levels of attainment, if you will. And it is the entire point of meditation. Not a meditative practice, but meditation itself. When we are sitting in meditation, we're trying to bring our mind to complete stillness. That means we suspend mental processes and brain activity. We are there in utter silence. There's no voice, there's no nothing. Utter stillness, utter silence. And we experience this sense of no mind. And then what we're trying to do is hold that state as long as we can each time we are in meditation. That is the point of real, authentic meditation. Meditation is not relaxation. Meditation is not trying to do anything. Meditation is the opposite of all that. Meditation is doing absolutely nothing. You don't try to go into no mind. You don't try to do anything. You don't try to still the mind. You don't try to go into silence. You don't try anything. You just sit and allow it to settle. The analogy that a lot of people use is if you take a glass of water and you drop some dirt into that water, right? All of that dirt settles in there. You can mix it up. Now you have this brown water. Everything's all mixed up. And you have this glass of muddy water. In this analogy, the water represents the mind, and the mud or dirt represents all of the thoughts running through it. And if you have that swirled up glass of mud and you just leave it set, what's going to happen eventually is all of that mud is just going to settle on the bottom, and it will separate from the water. That's what we're looking to do. We just want to leave it alone, not try to do anything, and just let it all settle. Okay? This is part of the key to moving into no mind. And this is the whole nature of meditation. That is meditation in a nutshell. You just sit, you don't try to do anything, and you allow the mind to become silent all on its own. You allow the mind to become still all on its own. And a lot of us may think, well, that could take a long time. Yes, it absolutely could. This is why patience is a virtue. This is why impatience is a product of the ego-dominated mind. We have to be patient. The more patient we are going in, the more that we let go of any expectations or anything else, the more quickly this comes around. So if you go into meditation with an expectation of attaining something, that creates a blockage. But if you just go into it, understand, okay, well, ultimately, this is what I'm looking for, but I'm going into this practice just for the sake of the practice itself, and I'm not expecting anything. That's how to properly enter into meditation. Now, I've found, or at least I have kind of categorized Mushin into various levels, because I find that in martial arts, for instance, and possibly like dancing and other things, you attain a state of capability, of skill, where you can move from the subconscious mind instead of having to have a forced conscious movement. And when you do this, you can actually move the body without thinking. Usually the body moves kind of out of reflex, and then the mind is saying, hey, what did I just do? And tries to catch up. So we know this can happen. And in martial arts, we are taught to use Mushin at an appropriate time. Mushin is the Japanese term most commonly used for no mind. So what that refers to is sometimes we have no thought when we move. And a lot of people think this is the ultimate state of Mushin, but it's not. It's kind of like in meditation. You reach a state that is referred to as nirvana, right? A state where you feel all of this bliss and perfect relaxation and stillness, and you think everything is amazing and you've become awakened. But in reality, nirvana is not the same as awakening. It's only like the halfway mark. It's only a benchmark. And a lot of people get fooled and stop there instead of continuing to go beyond that. So a lot of people do the same with no mind. They will get to a point where they actually feel the incredible relief of not thinking for a moment, and they believe they have total Mushin. Well, you do. You have part of it, and this is no small task. Trust me. So congratulations when you reach that point. But I want you to know that there is still more to be had. We can turn off our thoughts. We can turn off our intentions. We can go beyond the mind itself. We can go to where we transcend any of that, to where we're utterly disconnected from our physical and mental forms. And of course, you don't want to go that far in martial arts, but in spirituality you do. So see, we use sort of a superficial, if you will, level of Mushin in martial arts and of no mind in our martial arts movements. But then in spirituality, we take this concept much further. And indeed, it is generally the practice of spirituality that allows us to attain the level of Mushin anyway. You're not going to do that practicing physical movement, practicing a two-person kata or whatever. It's just not going to happen. There's too much going on. You have to sit. You have to engage in meditation in order to attain no mind. Now, there are some Chinese forms where you actually like walk in a circle or engage the form and enter into a meditative state. And then you can also go into a state of no mind through that very slow, very easy motion as well. And then we understand in some of the martial arts where you're moving very quickly, you can't think. You have to have a degree of no mind. You have to have that basic level where you can move without thinking, because it's too slow. Thinking is too slow, and you're moving the body too quickly, changing directions. And if you try to think and control your movements, then it all falls apart. But if you can let go of that and just move from the subconscious mind and move from this place of no conscious thought, then you can move with this first or second level of no mind. And this is where we see that some internal martial practices are actually action or moving meditations, right? So you can do that. My personal experience, this doesn't mean it's the only way, of course, it's just my personal experience. I found it far easier to sit in meditation and attain this and then put it into all my physical movement than to try and get it through the physical movement. Okay? Now that may be different for you, and that's fine. There's no single way that's the way or the best way. It's just whatever works best for you is what you want to discover and then stick to. This takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of persistence to ever attain. But probably at some point in your life, you've already experienced this, right? I had a point where when I was younger, I was a teenager, and I remember I was sitting on the kitchen counter with a friend of mine, and his girlfriend was across the room, and I did what I did a lot at that point and made a wise-ass comment, and it was all in fun, but I made a wise-ass comment, and I was looking away, and she had a tennis ball in her hand, and evidently she had chucked it at my head, and I had no idea she threw the ball or anything, and suddenly my left hand, and I'm right-handed, my left hand came up and caught that tennis ball, and I had no idea what I had even done for a minute. It took me a minute to put two and two together, see? So you can probably recall some point in time where you had something like that happen, where you moved without thinking. You had some kind of glimpse into the sensation of all of the thoughts kind of ceasing for a moment. And this lets us know that this is a very real and attainable state of mind. However, what we're after is to be able to dwell there at our own choosing. Okay? We want it to be a decision that we make, and we want it to be a skill we attain to where we can actually turn it on and off at will. Obviously, you don't want to be in no mind while you're doing your taxes, right? You have to crunch numbers, you have to do everything. You can't do that while you're in no mind. You need the thinking process. You need to engage the mind at that point. But then when you're done, you can put all that stuff aside, and then you can go into no mind. One of my favorite ways to go into no mind now is we live on a small mountain, and we have a deck that overlooks the mountain and the peak across from us. And I love to go out there in the evening with my wife, and we will stand there and we'll do some talking, just stand and visit, and we'll look out at the scenery, and it's so beautiful. I like to just turn the mind off. I like to go into no mind and just be like that. I get to actually really be with my wife. I get to be where I live. I get to be in this incredible and beautiful scenery of where I live. So I get to enjoy that. See, when you're in no mind, you can enjoy because you feel the connection to all of this. You feel the oneness, and there's no thoughts, there's no ego, there's nothing. There's just freedom and connection, and it's amazing. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy, and luckily I can do that most any night I want. So sometimes we'll just stand out there, and she'll do the same practice, and we'll visit and things for a while, but then we just kind of stand there, go into no mind, and just take it all in. And then when we come back, we kick that thinking process back in to walk in. After a while, it gets so easy. It gets to be second nature, and we just walk in for the evening, but you feel so relaxed and refreshed and everything. And like I said, meditation is not relaxation. Relaxation is a byproduct of what happens when you are in meditation, because you transcend the body. You're not worried about feeling the body or connecting to the body or anything. So it naturally relaxes. It settles just like the mind settles. Now, in the book, I provide you with a sample exercise, a practice that you can engage in. What I wanted to do here was give you more supplemental information so you can use this when you engage this practice. But the practice that I placed in my book is a fantastic practice. Sometimes things like that are a little easier to use than just trying to jump right into meditation where you're letting everything become still. But that should not dissuade you from trying it. Try it. You never know what's going to work for you. If you try it and you're like, well, this is just too difficult for me right now, that's fine. Then use the practice in the book. It was meant to be a very simple beginner's level practice that will be effective. And then after you can do that, it should be extremely easy to just sit in meditation and go into no mind. And remember, 3 keys that I give to succeeding with this in my book is patience, perseverance, and consistency. You see, being able to apply those things to our practice, that's what makes them secret. That's some of the nature with the esoteric stuff. It's always right there in front of your face, but you don't understand what it means or how to apply it. So I'm giving you that here. These are the keys that make it work. This is a big secret. This is a shortcut. Okay? If you are struggling with being patient, you struggle with perseverance, you struggle with consistency of your practices, then you're going to struggle with the practice that you're doing, because the practice, such as meditation, requires those skills. If you have those skills in place, then you can begin to make far greater and more rapid progress. So there you have it, Mushin and becoming zero. Once you do that, you will understand what spirituality is all about. Please make sure and visit me at www.expansionmastery.com. Grab your autographed copy of Expansion Mastery. You can also get my newly expanded and revised ebook, as well as, very shortly, the Breathing Mastery program. Stay tuned and be patient with me, folks. It's coming. I'm working on a number of things right now. And make sure you tune in for a special Valentine's Day episode. It will be released on Valentine's Day. So we're going to release it on Friday that week instead of Monday. Be ready for that. And make sure to share the authentic practices from these podcasts and do all the social media stuff that helps us out. Subscribe, like, leave some positive comments, feedback. For those of you who are doing that, I sincerely appreciate that. Thank you so much. Together we are making a difference. This is not just me. I'm just one lone little voice out there. But by sharing it, we team up, we work together, and we get to help people understand what authentic spirituality is at a time when it is needed most in the world. Until next time, my friends, I wish you the very best in your practices, your attainment of no mind, and your life. Take care.